Good evening and welcome to tonight's work session. Today is Monday, May the 9th, 2022. The time is now 5 p.m. The work session for the City of Trinidad will now come to order. We have 3 items on there. One is the gas rate study. Second is code enforcement, and the third item is discussion on council meeting decorum, and of course, fourth is agenda items that council may want to bring up in the future. So let's go ahead and get started with the gas rate study.
So, Mayor, Steve is here to kind of give you an update again, but we planned on having the consultant here that did the study, and they were unable to join us this evening, so I'll let Steve answer what he can, but the whole pro forma that they have here, you might have questions that...
Yeah, there's a lot of
go ahead.
material on that pro forma.
Yeah, there is.
The consultant and the team that designed this, I don't know a lot of the answers that you might have for that, but like I said, he had prior obligations, so he wasn't able to attend. I tried to get him on Zoom, and he was tied up for this meeting, so.
Well, kind of explain as best as you can, and then what we could do is we'll ask questions, and maybe you could write them down, and if we have to get answers from him,
Okay.
we can do something like that. That's fine too.
Yeah. So what they came up with was a 6.7% increase overall on our gas rates. We're going to separate the customer charge and a commercial charge. Right now we charge $9.60 across the board, customer or commercial. Commercial equipment is a lot more expensive than the residential equipment. So he said it would be in the best interest if we separated that and made the commercial equipment or charge a little more expensive. So the residential charge is $11, and that's a flat charge across the board. Once a month that gets charged. The commercial charge will be $22.65. There's about 500 commercial accounts that we have. So to get that 6.7 across the board, that's one of the aspects he's doing to get that. And then the other one is the gas supply charge, and the delivery charge is going to go up a little bit. As you can see on here, it's going up from basically 22.75 cents to 23.33. And then the delivery charge is going up from about 21 cents to 21.54. So those two charges are your usage charges. So the more gas you use, the more you pay. That's per CCF, which is 100 cubic feet. And then it also explains monthly about what the residential bill will look like, the increase in the bill per month, and then same way with the businesses of the increase, depending on the usage of gas. So what we're trying to do is get a little closer to our budget prediction because of the fluctuation of the gas prices. We're trying to kind of find a happy medium. What they did tell me is they don't want to jump in too much right now and just go with what the predictions are going to be in the end of the year, because again, those are just predictions. We don't know if it's going to sustain that way or if it's going to stable out. They're thinking it's going to go that way. If it continues going that way, we'll have another evaluation in November, and we may have to increase a little bit more, but we don't want to make a big jump right now. We're just trying to balance out at this point.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Councilman, but one thing that stuck out to me is your net operating income for 2022. It's a negative of $423,000 versus 2021 at this time was only 47.8 in the black.
Yeah.
It continues to be in the red, and I guess that is probably my biggest concern.
That is what I was trying to get some answers from. Again, what he told me on that right there, because that is what stands out, and that's what stood out to me when we did the study. That's with all of our budget, that's with our budget in it right now. So if we spend everything that we budgeted in our budget, that's what we will come up with. Again, he says he don't want to jump too far into increasing the percentage because we do have money in our cash flow. We have an abundance of money there. He wants to deplete that somewhat in our cash flow. So that's what the explanation he told me. If we don't meet all of the things in our budget, which some years we do, some years we don't, then that number will drop down below
So
that.
one other question before I move on to council is you're saying that he wants to deplete that money, some of that money.
Yeah.
So what is the amount of money that we have there and how much is he recommending that we?
That is down on line number 37. So right now for 2022, we have $5.2 million.
Okay.
And as you see the years going down, it gets down a little more.
Right.
Um,
So we're using that.
We're using that
extra funding
money
to offset.
To offset the cost, yes. Yes, that's the explanation he gave me. Like I say, there's a lot of numbers in here. Working with them, I'm trying to understand how they're doing the figuring and stuff, so that's why I wished he could have been here. He could explain a lot better than I can, but in a roundabout way, that's kind of the explanation he gave me. Because of the cash flow being so high, and we're basically kind of a non-profit, then we got to get that cash flow down a little bit, and that's how we'll offset the costs.
Can't have
Again,
too much money.
Can't have too much money.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, in 2023, and as you see, it keeps going down, and then in 2025 prediction, they like to just work 2 years, but they do put this out for about 4 years.
Which
But
are
every
fine.
year we'll look at it and see where we're going.
On the cash flow now, when it was up to 7 million and 665, how does that build up and now it's declining so much? Is it just because we're taking out, are we not putting anything back in there?
In the cash balance,
Yeah,
yeah, we're not putting anything back in there. We've been using it as it's been going. I can't answer for the years past.
is there a reason why we're not putting anything back in there to keep it up?
Do you know exactly what that is? We're not
Yeah.
allowed to.
Is there some reason why?
Well, we kind of got upside down when the gas department lost four employees that we weren't able to hire. We didn't hire for
Quite a few years, like
almost 3 years.
almost 2
So
years. Yeah.
we were building up there, and it's like we got a little bit cash flow. We haven't adjusted the gas charge rate for
Quite a long
5 years now. It's kind of been on a steady thing now. So now with the gas prices as they're going, and then Steve was able to hire.
We got back to a full crew last 2 years ago. I think we got back to a complete full crew.
So you can see it starting to come back down because we're actually got a full
Yeah.
crew.
2014 is when we lost 4 employees and then had a hard time getting them replaced. So we were kind of short-handed for a number of years.
Mr. Ebola, do you have any questions?
Well, Steve, on your expenses there, on the future projection, that number doesn't change for 4 years on line 6. You got 2,424,322 up to 2026.
Line what number?
6 purchase gas,
Yeah.
but everything else increased under there.
Okay, that's the gas we purchase, that we buy. That's the price we're paying right for yearly. So in 2019, we paid 1.5 million. Then it went down in 2020 to 1.4. And that's what we had budgeted for 2021. It actually went to 1.8. They're projecting it to be about 2.3 this year.
How do you know it's going to stay the same for the next 4 years?
We don't know what that is. That's all an educated guess on their part.
So just the number's still the same?
The numbers kind of just stayed like that. Yeah, they just kind of project something in there. Again, like I say, they're going off a NYMEX prediction.
Okay.
Yeah, which is the New York Mercantile Exchange. So that's what they use to kind of predict what the gas will do. And will it do that? We don't know. I mean, it could. We just don't know what it's doing. The war is having a significant effect on what the gas is doing. From month to month, it's changing quite a bit.
So nothing in this column is a lock for anything.
No, it usually, I mean, it never really is. It's kind of, you do your best. I guess they're doing their best educated guess at.
Well, then again, my question, you didn't want to get locked into something that you're paying more for that actually came down years
Yeah,
later.
exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's why we don't lock in long term anymore.
Right.
These consultants also try and predict the weather. They look at weather patterns and everything and try
The
and.
weathermen are only 1/3 of the.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Last year in February, we had that extreme weather event, what they call, and fortunately, you know, we had a storage, so a lot of companies didn't have that, a lot of cities, and they ended up paying actually $1 million in extra revenue.
More
Their
than
customers, yeah. It didn't affect us at all. We just lost a lot in our storage that we're trying to rebuild again. So Raton, I know Colorado Springs, their gas increased.
How much is storage? What's the average storage?
That we put in there?
Yeah.
Cubic feet, I don't know, they go by percentage wise. We can only put into storage from April to October. And every month we put a little bit in there. We could only have about 90% capacity. I don't know how much actually goes in there. I can find that out. Yeah.
So when you're talking about commercial equipment, is the commercial equipment affects the commercial gas rate? Are you talking about like meters?
I'm talking about their meters, regulators, taps, piping, valves, all that stuff. It's just to give you an example, a regular household meter is $100.
Uh-huh.
A meter for Safeway is about $10,000.
But like for my building, you know, I think we just have just a regular gas meter on.
Yours is probably a regular, might be just a little larger than the house.
So when you say commercial, you're talking about the big consumption commercials, or all of us?
All commercial buildings, all
Okay,
buildings used to use the heat and stuff for profit.
okay.
Yeah, that would be commercial.
So on these projections and on the pro forma, is that including the rate increase?
Yes, this is all.
This is including
This is
the rate?
including the rate increase for 2022, yes. Yes.
Okay.
And we're trying to, the explanation gave, we're trying to take it easy and ease this rate increase up. The predictions are, we will probably have to do another rate increase next year in January. It'll probably go into effect. But again, we don't want to jump into that real hard now and put a 20% increase and then
Right.
overcharge by the end of the year. We want to kind of just gradually move it up.
No, times are tough for everybody.
Yeah.
I already got my first call today on the rate increase.
Oh, yeah. So just to back up on procedures, last meeting, council set the hearing date
Right.
for June 7th, I believe.
Yes, June 7th.
Along with that, every customer got a letter
Yep.
and there's ads in the paper. We want to give everybody the opportunity to.
All the other first sent out Friday.
Yeah, I got mine today.
Any other questions?
Further questions?
No, you answered questions.
So the consultant is advising that we use some of our cash balance. Is that what's going to fill the negative?
Yes, that will fill the
Loss?
void, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
And that is if we spend everything that we have budgeted. So right now, there's a couple projects on my 5-year plan that, because of what's going on right now, and we are still in our meter project, and I gotta allocate that so that we gotta get that done this summer. Some of these projects probably ain't gonna get done. I mean, there's a good chance they won't. I see 2 of them that might not, which is close to $250,000 that are budgeted. So if I don't fulfill my entire budget, then that number will drop from 400,000 to whatever I don't use.
Do you have adequate cash balance to do those things that you perceive that need to be done?
Projects, yes.
Okay. Is there a significant amount that needs to be done?
Well,
or?
There are things to improve the infrastructure. They're not like the emergency things that need to be done. It's just long-term improvements on the infrastructure. So if they're not done this year, we'll try to push them along and shuffle things to
Okay,
get them done for the next year.
okay, so they won't be lost.
No, it's not something that's gonna be lost. It'll still be, they still need to be done, in my estimation, for the infrastructure improvement.
Thank
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. What about manpower? I heard you mention that you were short-staffed early on. What are we looking like right now? as far
Right
as-
now, I just had one person leave a few months ago. Went out to Evergreen. So I'm waiting for this rate study to get done to see where we're at and stuff to rehire.
Okay. How many would you be hiring?
One.
Just one?
Yes.
All right.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Do you happen to know that cash balance target, line 38? How is that determined? Is that a percentage of budget or?
I don't know, no, I don't know the target what that is.
Because I mean,
I could maybe interject. We have our minimum reserve target in that little box down below on what, the cash reserve policy. So our target is 1.178888. Those are small, I can't. So that's kind of the target we try to keep as a balance, just in case, something happens or.
and so currently we're significantly above that.
Yeah.
What is there a problem with having higher cash balance than the target?
Is it, usually with, municipal utilities and enterprises like gas, water, sewer, and electric, you're not trying to make money, you're trying to maintain your system and keep enough reserve to, if something drastic happens, that we could still serve the community and we got a little bit upside down here and we're trying to correct it.
So it seems to me, I mean, looking from a residential, and I mean, even if you wanted to include commercial rates, the increase is fairly modest especially when you look at a relation to every other increase we've had. By no means am I saying, hey, it's because every increase a ratepayer out there sees stacks onto the previous previous raises. Our dollar buys a lot less now than it did even 6 months ago, right? We were talking before the meeting about what I do at work. I mean, we see that at work too. It's just especially metal stuff, ridiculously high. This is my question. So it says 5.3% increase for residential and 8.7% proposed rate increase for commercial, right?
That's the difference between basically he has it here as a customer charge, the $11 and the $22.65.
I mean,
That's where you get your differences in
sure,
percentage.
this may be oversimplifying, but I mean, it begs the question, if we're trying to drive down our cash reserve, why would we not forego a rate increase and lower the cash reserve?
Because he doesn't want to do it drastically, is what the explanation they gave me. They want to do it in a slow process, which would be about a 3-year process. And the way the gas is going up, we can't predict if that 400,000 is actually going to be 400,000 or it might be 600,000.
Right.
Because again, we're going into the later part of the month,
So,
November, December.
Say in 2 years, if gas rates, I mean, because historically they can go up to like $8 an in real easy,
Yeah.
which would
historic
be,
high.
yeah, extraordinarily high. So if that were to happen, we could use that cash balance to supplement gas purchase at the time.
At that time, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we could.
It's kind of what we're doing now, we've
Okay.
got this cash reserve rather than
Been using it.
bumping up customers and keeping the cash reserve. we're kind of easing the customer's bump by using the cash reserve that they paid for anyway, so we're kind of trying to
It's kind of balanced.
balance it out over the long
I
term.
mean, we could do it in 1 year, but that's.
Yeah, that
not
won't be
very
wise.
smart
No.
to do that.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Question for you though, you being that you're in that business, are you hearing anything from your industry over the projections for the next year or two? Because I know they
It's,
try to project out. What are they saying?
Forward looking, it's going to continue to go up, and then especially with the influence of the Ukraine issue. I mean, that's, there's a whole lot of geopolitical instability that could really affect our gas prices, especially. I mean, this is getting way deeper than we probably want to, but if we start exporting LNG, liquefied natural gas, we could see really big increases here. And again, I mean, that has mixed issues directly for Trinidad, because will we say, well, then that's super beneficial for the three major producers in this area is Wapiti to the south, Ogres and Evergreen. Well, that being said, depending on how their sales portfolio looks, those people may not be seeing immediate increase of their gas going into the pipeline. However, they will see immediate increase in costs, so it's still a real mixed bag for us. And oddly, for the consumers, again, the real people that do well are futures traders. So that's.
So the other question is this: we know that a lot of the oil producers burn off a lot of their natural gas, right?
Yeah.
Do they see them kind of starting to capture the natural gas instead of burning it off?
I can't speak to that.
I was wondering, that's just a general question.
General wisdom is, unfortunately, the infrastructure to capture that gas, because when you think of wells down in Texas, I mean, there's wells in Texas that burn, like you said, daily. Way more gas than we have producing a single well here. It's because of the way they're produced laterally, horizontally. That being said, you have to install a ton of infrastructure to collect that gas, and then as Frank can speak to as well, because he knows people that work in that, the level of expertise it takes for compression to get it to sales. There's an actual shortage of that in this country too. So you have to build the infrastructure, then you have to have the hurdle of manning the infrastructure.
It's not cost effective.
Well, it's good to know, because I didn't know if that infrastructure was in place. That's the thing.
No, it's not. There's a lot that has to happen, and that's to my knowledge, although I don't have first-hand knowledge of production in the South. I would
Okay, the question I have, a couple questions I have for you. One is, we have our metering projects. Are we at full capacity for our metering project right now to capture any losses? Or are we still working through some of the meters that need to be installed? Or?
Right now, we have about 470 meters that need to still be installed. Hopefully we'll get that done by the end of July. Those meters, from what we understand, we are pretty much capturing everything right now.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Those meters that have been installed, and do you have an idea of what percentage of increase, because you now have the new meters versus the old meters,
Yeah.
that you've been able to capture? Any ideas? That's kind of
Talked to Billing a little bit about that. We haven't put a specific number on it yet. It's not as significant as we thought, as far as gas. All I can speak of is gas. We did capture some. To take a guess, it's just a rough guess, it'd probably be up to maybe 4%. There wasn't a whole lot.
I was just trying to get it, if we knew that it would offset some of these red numbers.
Yeah, no, I think where we're at in our project as far as gas, we're probably capturing 99.9% of everything.
The other couple of questions that I have is, I know that we have all these reserves. One of the projects that we've been talking about is with the gas tie-in to Walsenburg.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that something that is on your budget?
That is on the budget
Okay.
for this year. Yeah, we've been trying to carry that over. That's been a very difficult project. We've ran through a lot of obstacles, and then Walsenburg's city managers have changed, and it's kind of start over, and landowners have changed. They gave us easements, and the process, they don't want to give an easement, and it's
So it's able-
challenging. The biggest challenging is all the kind of like political hurdles rather than the construction.
So if everything was clear to go, that money that you have back in your actual budget, it's not gonna come from the reserves if you're able to do that project? Or
It's what money we have in the budget right now
Okay.
for this year. And I'm applying for a PHMSA grant for that also. There's a grant process out there right now for municipality grant, owned gas companies.
So what does it look like to overcome those hurdles that you're seeing?
Basically, right now, we're gonna have to start all over. So, probably right after I get this rate study done, I'll start tackling into that.
Just so I understand, what is the Walsenburg?
What it is that to try to increase the capacity. Go ahead.
Yes, we have one gate station. The gate station is where our gas is delivered to feed the city. We have one on the east side of town by the movie picture show house. And then the gas goes through town and go all the way out to Industrial Park. With the CNG stations and the asphalt plant that we've put in, we are losing a little bit of pressure out there. And in order to get our industrial park so we could have future growth out there, we would like to get another gate station on the north side of town, which Walsenburg has a gas line that runs, it's their transmission line from there, right there by the movie picture show house, out towards our industrial park and out to Walsenburg. We'd like to put a tap on that, and we wouldn't use a lot of their gas, we would just subsidize our gas as the pressure starts to drop.
Okay.
So it kind of balance out our industrial park side. Everything here in town is good, it's just industrial park where we're having a few issues. It's kind of a perfect storm issue. If we have our compressed natural gas stations turned on, and we have the asphalt plant turned on, then we use pressure. And we just like to keep that
Sounds like a
control.
good idea.
Yeah, that's
So
what
what
we've been talking about
want
for
to get
about
that
2 years.
Yeah, that's something, a lot of political hurdles to jump on that one.
This is something that you might have to reach back in your hat from years ago is, of course, we're seeing these rates now and the increases of, the natural gas, just probably, 5-6 years ago, was probably at a pretty much higher cost, correct?
I don't know how long ago it was,
For
but it
instance,
was probably in 2008.
Yeah, 2008 would be the
I
high.
think about 2008 was the highest.
and for instance, purchase gas right here is like one for this year is 2.3 going up, it looks like, in purchase gas. And I was wondering how much it was back then, that's kind of a reach, but I was just trying to get some
I
ideas
think
how
gas
much
was
we paid
around,
for
I
that.
think gas at the time then was around $5.50 to $6. Is that where it was around?
It was spiked.
Right now, last month we paid $4.80. So that's what
We're not too far off from that.
We're not too far off. Like I said, I wasn't involved in this side of the thing at that time, this side of the table, but I kind of had a little knowledge, and I think it was around $6.
What's kind of, then the next question is what's been kind of, everybody has been talking, like what happened last year in Texas, the cost of electricity just blew up, all these people were getting
Gas
ridiculous,
also.
gas and all this stuff. And then, like you mentioned earlier, like last year, we had a cold weather, but it's not the first time, it's only, that happens all the time here, it's not, we'll have some,
Again, that went back to the weather predictors. They had predicted February to be a warm month,
Mhm.
and then we had 5 or 7 days of extreme cold weather, and it hit the whole mid-United States, so the Midwest, all the way down into Texas, which normally doesn't use a lot of natural gas. Florida got hit. So that was, a lot of companies went over there, a lot of gas usage. You're only allowed to use so much gas per city.
You know, I guess,
And the pipelines were starving for gas, and I guess the suppliers, like Evergreen, couldn't keep up with the demand. So the daily price of that gas, I mean, it went ridiculous. I got some figures, it went up to like $331.
well, I guess, you know,
$4.
what really kind of bugs me is the weathermen, the predictors. And like I said, we've had weather here in past years where we've had extreme weather below zero for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So this was not an anomaly. I think it's just,
Just a minute.
it's crazy.
Depends on how they predict that month to be.
The other problem though is, I mean, if you over purchase, you're penalized.
You're penalized for over purchasing.
It's a real.
It's touchy, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just getting down on the weather.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. Steve, what's the update? I drive by down there at your place.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the gas department down there. Yeah, you got a fence building, you're doing some work to the building. Is that fence, is it supposed to go out further, or we're not covering that area? Did we buy that whole section?
We bought that whole section.
Okay, what are we gonna do outside that fence area?
I don't know that. All I wanted the fence off was what I was gonna utilize,
Uh-huh.
and we had talked about different stuff the city could do with that. So, I guess it's up to
One of the
whatever you
things-
guys wanna do.
The
I
trail-
know you were thinking about a trail.
One of the things that we talked about was that to maybe utilize some of that for parking from across the street, because right now, those people across the street, if they have two vehicles, they're taking up street parking rather, and not enough available parking, so that's what we're talking about, allowing them to do some parking.
So, yeah,
Trailhead.
yeah,
trailhead
was
was-
good.
Yeah.
So I fenced off what I was gonna utilize and what I anticipated all I needed. And then the rest is.
Up to us, is that what you're saying? Well, no, I was just kind of curious,
I
because
don't
it's
know. I
getting,
don't have plans for it.
it's getting weedy down there
We'll
and stuff.
maintain it, you know.
Yeah,
It's starting to get.
yeah, it looks pretty bad down there, that's why I was wondering.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Mike, any other?
No comments.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate that.
Good job, Steve.
Thank you.
Good job, Steve.
Okay, the next item on here is our code enforcement, and one of the things that we're coming into the time of the year that we get hammered about all the various type of things that we're hearing that are not getting done. I do know that you have 3 code enforcement officers, correct?
2 right now,
2 right now.
and Harold does abandoned vehicles.
So is Haddo plus 2 or just Haddo plus 1?
Harold plus 2 right now.
Okay, so you have 2 code enforcement officers plus Haddo who does the
Abandoned vehicles.
Okay. And I was looking at this, and I think the biggest concern that we have, or I have, and I know I've had some discussion with Ms. Grego in the past about there's some of the times to, for instance, vehicles, when the vehicle is tagged, they give them 7 days to move the vehicle. I mean, if this vehicle is on wheels and could be moved, it should be moved within, a couple of days. I think that maybe that's something that maybe we, as council, can advise to change.
It's all by ordinance.
But we could change that ordinance. And this is what I want to discuss. Are there anything in this ordinance that you see here that maybe we need to change, because we have weed ordinances, we have vehicle ordinances, there's some other ordinances that kind of go beyond, but even though they're in there, they're beyond us, like the alcohol one, that's different. But anyway, let's get some questions and concerns from the council.
So, some of our ordinances wrote right off the state though, so we'd have to work with Russ to see that we're still complying with what the state statute
Okay.
says.
Well, I guess we can
As you can
question
see, I broke it down because it's confusing. I mean, you get in there and just read it off, you need to be less down to understand it. But I tried to break it down for the junk vehicles and show, because there's different situations for everyone. Whether it's where it's parked, how it's parked, what kind of condition it's in, everything falls under a different statute and part of the ordinance. So I broke it down for you, and Mike, they did get these right.
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, we got it.
It's in there.
Right, I broke it down and it shows where the vehicle's at and what part of the ordinance needs to be followed with it. Kind of makes it a little bit simpler.
Get some questions from the council. Keep going.
But Charlie, are you calling these courtesy notices when you actually issue a notice on somebody's vehicle? Is it a courtesy? Is it called a courtesy notice?
No, we go straight by the state statute.
Okay.
It's parked there, we tag it.
So does it differentiate between, let's say, a vehicle that needs to be moved as opposed to weeds?
Yes, weeds are something different. I also provide you with that on the next page. So hazardous growth, you're given a written notice will be issued to the owner of the property by U.S. mail or posted to the property. Give them 15 days to abate the nuisance. So after the 15th day, we issue a citation, and they get a court appearance. The court appearance is usually 30 days past that. But in the meantime, once the property isn't cleaned, we can get a crew to come in and clean the property. One of the problems we're having, and I had a discussion with Audra today, is we used to have 3 vendors that did that. 2 no longer can do it, and the third one possibly can't do it any longer either. So we're going to have to put out in the newspaper and on our websites looking for licensed vendors to come and help us clean these properties, because the city can't do it. We used to have the city crews go in and do it, and they just can't keep up with it. So one of the problems with hazardous growth, and I've got a property right now, is the property owner's dead. There's no one there, and so there's no one to issue the citation. If you're renting that property, I can't issue you the citation. I got to issue the owner of the property the citation.
Is that state statute?
That's ordinance.
You can change that, right?
Well, you could, but I don't know that you would want to. I
Well, the
mean,
reason why I'm saying this
Right.
is, Mr. Downs, is that the owner could live in Texas,
Right.
and they get the notice. If you send them a notice by mail, it could take 3 days, it just depends. They could just say, well, let's up to the guy that I'm renting to take care of it, so.
Well-
That's the question.
And if it isn't done, we're going to go in and clean it. But like I said, we're going to have problems until I can get some good vendors that are licensed in the city to go in and help us do it.
And Mayor, I was just thinking, it depends kind of like on the landlord-tenant sort of relationship, right? Like if it's an apartment complex, obviously you would want to involve the landlord, not the individual tenants, but it depends. But you're right, if it's like renting a house and it's an absentee owner, you would want the tenant to be responsible. You're absolutely right. Yep, I agree.
So Charlie, I know where you're at there. A renter cannot be issued a citation, and you have in highlighted repeat offenders. If there's a repeat offender during the same calendar year, do not send the notice to cut and remove hazardous growth, just issue the citation.
Okay, what you're reading for so means I've had so many people coming in and out of code enforcement, and I wrote, this is an SOP. This is a standard operating procedure for my employees, so they can, once they have a question, they can go back and read that. And that's where
But
I.
on a repeat offender, you don't give extensions then, right?
No. We go in and clean the property.
Okay.
So we charge the property owner for the price of cleaning up the property.
Yeah.
Do we usually get that money back?
Yeah, they put liens on the property.
Well, that's a good way to get it. I noticed there's that one property that we talked about several years ago with the trailer used for storage up on the, it would be maybe Monroe, in that area, the gentleman that had the 3 trailers that were there.
I'm trying to remember, I'm sorry.
I don't know what the gentleman's name was, but he brought 3 trailers and he was gonna put them together and build a house out of them. But I went by there
Oh,
the
yeah,
other
yeah.
day and they're still there.
They're still there, and our planning department is trying to work with them to get moving ahead on those.
That's building code.
Right.
That'll follow building code.
Okay. I've had a lot of conversations with the people down on Boulevard. You know, you and I talked about it too. Is there anything going on to help that situation?
So the boulevard, the one trailer, it could be towed down.
Okay.
It met a few days ago, it passed and we could tow it. They had that fire down there, we haven't gone down there to tow it yet. But we can tow that any day now.
Okay,
The new trailer that's on there, we gotta go through the same process again.
okay,
We gotta post it and give it the time frame as well. We were there Friday night on another incident, but we got a huge junk accumulation property behind the house that
Yes.
I don't think people can see that we're gonna have to work with as well. The problem I got there, and I do take these things into consideration, Manuel is in pretty bad shape.
yeah, I know.
His nephew Sam is there, and he doesn't help him. So when we talk about reasonable time, what is a reasonable time for a guy that is in that condition?
Right,
So I don't know if the solution is dragging him to court and giving fines on top of everything else. So we try to work with them. The property on the other end, I'm at the end. Mike and I have had this conversation. We've done everything we can to try to help get that property done. Now, a big portion is gone and removed, and he has made a big, huge improvement. But I think we're to the point now where we're just gonna issue the citation, we're gonna wait, and then I'm gonna have the city clean that up as well.
Is that the one going kind of right out the corner?
Right on.
Because I went there the other day.
Yeah, that one. And again, there's the human part of it. The man's been in the hospital several times, and, we back off. We back off when that's happening.
well, that house, is that deemed a total loss, the
Yeah.
house burned?
Yeah.
How long do they have to
What does the bill do?
So, building inspector posted it, I can't remember. I think it's 30 days for cleanup, and if that doesn't happen, then the city goes in and it will have to clean it up, and we'll put a lien on the property. I'll just say it, they were hoarders. There is a ton of stuff in there. It's gonna be pretty expensive at the landfill. And we'll lien the property and probably it'll sit there.
You're talking about the property east of the house that burned?
Oh, I thought we were talking about the burned structure.
Yeah, I was, there's clutter behind that as well.
Oh, my
There's
gosh.
a ton. And I didn't see it until Friday,
Yeah,
because that's another thing, you can't go on property, we have to be able to see it from the public street. So when people call and they say, I'm looking out my back window, I can see into my neighbor's backyard, we can't do that. We can get a statement from them and then possibly get a warrant, and do that. But unless you can see it from public view,
Is alley public view? Just
Yes.
curious. Okay.
But there's no alley.
yeah.
no, he's got 50 years of stuff there, it's gonna,
Wow.
the house is the least of the problem in that property.
Well, those poor people have been,
Yeah, and then I had also noticed Friday, and this is something I was gonna talk to Mike about, they had an electric service there for that other trailer that I gotta go post. So I would hope the city wouldn't go put up that temporary, although they may want that to, I don't know, but they.
No, and you don't
The
wanna,
temporary service that they're gonna put in,
really.
it's on the pole, yeah.
okay. That's all.
Okay, great.
No, I know it's really tough, but there's a lot of places last year and from this year, there's weeds everywhere. I mean, in the yards, and I know, like you say, you're having trouble getting people to do that. I mean, that's my only, I got a neighbor next door to me, the weeds are over, I have a 7-foot fence and the weeds are over the top of that. Nobody ever cleaned it for the last 2 years. And I've
It's
complained
backyard
about
or is it?
the Marcos.
Oh, okay.
And it's terrible. And
Well,
there's a couple places even, like like up in Allendale, right where I walk a lot, there's houses that, they never cut the lawn in that, I mean, the lawn's above the fence. And I asked, you know, how come, they said, well, we called the city, nobody's ever done anything about it. So I don't know if they're not calling the right, you guys or somebody else.
So up until last year, we weren't able to, we would either cite them or clean up the property. So now we're able to do both. You know, we cite them and we give them the notice at the same time. So that way the city could go in there and start cleaning up the property. We just started doing that. So that should speed up the process as well.
And I think we need to, not only other people's property, but we need to take care of our own. And we need to, I don't know if you did any more on research on the arroyos and the areas down there. We really need to get all that done, especially with all this dryness and weather and wind. I mean, if they ever had a fire there, it would be a really mess. So that's my real big concern.
So on that 15th day of the weeds, we used to wait and we give them a court date.
Right,
And
I
they
remember
didn't-
that.
And they didn't want us to do anything until after the court
Right,
date.
used
So
to
the court
wait.
date's usually 30 days past that.
It used to be
So
10
the
days.
summer was over by the time
Yeah,
the
that's
person-
right.
By the person, but now they've allowed me to, on the 15th day, we issue the citation and we also go in and clean it.
And then, just for clarify, when we had an issue when I was on the council before down there at the boulevard with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Well, we took them to court and he got it cleared up with, and we did have the city go down there and load up dump trucks of, is there a possibility we could do that with?
That's what we're gonna do.
one we're
Just go ahead
talking
and
about.
take care of that without worrying about it, yeah. Okay, that's it for me.
Trying to wrap my head around something. Are the citations that you get, are they civil infraction citations or are they,
It's a violation of
Criminal
the municipal
citation.
ordinance.
so is it criminal?
It is.
Okay. When I'm thinking about all of this, I'm wondering whether there are some aspects of code enforcement that could be done by non-sworn officers. And I understand the community service people are not sworn, but just people who, at the city, who could cite someone, who could send them a notification that we're getting complaints about your weeds, and take it that direction and leave any of the other kinds of infractions that require human contact, like dog issues and junk cars and all those kind of things that require human interaction. But if it's just someone's yard is a mess, or it's there's graffiti somewhere, I don't know why that has to involve the police. And it seems like if we're trying, y'all are, I'm sure, overwhelmed continually with all that you have to do. To me, I think it would make more sense if we reorganized our ordinance so that there were some aspects of code enforcement that didn't have anything to do with the police department.
So I told, okay. So I told Mike I wouldn't bring this up, but we've been talking the last several months. I'm one of the very few police departments that still does code enforcement. And I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
It's really difficult to send, whether they have a uniform sworn or whether, when Trinidad Police Department shows up, it sometimes puts a
Right.
bitter, bad taste into
It's
the.
scary for people, they
Right.
don't know.
So we've talked about pulling that from me. I would keep possibly just the junk vehicles, because there's certain parts of that state ordinance that has to be done by a sworn officer. So we would keep that, and I would keep my community service officers. But I agree that we're one of the very, very few cities that still enforce code enforcement. Even though they're not sworn, they're in a different uniform, I still get the complaints.
Yeah.
I mean, so it comes to me. So that's something we need to, maybe collectively come up with a plan to get that done. And what department does it fall under, and who leads it up?
Yeah.
So that's something we need to talk about in the future. And I agree with you.
Former councilperson Carlos Lopez sent us all a link to a website called C-Click Fix, which it's like a way that people in a community can communicate directly to their municipality about issues that they see of, refuse or weeds or graffiti, not public safety issues, just things that could be improved, and then it would go directly to whomever at the city is handling those things, and they would be in charge of the follow through with that. And I thought that was a good idea. I don't know what the cost involved, but it would also, I think, improve the way that people view how the city functions, that it's on it. I have a friend who just wrote recently who made a complaint about a commercial trash bin that hasn't been picked up for more than a week, and there's garbage coming out and flying away, and bears are coming, and they've made a complaint to the city and haven't gotten any action on it. And I'm wondering if that's because we have to involve the police department in something that should just be something we should be able to take care of without having to.
Trash-wise, I don't know if you noticed, Safeway was one of our biggest offenders of that same violation. We finally got them to come in and put a trash compactor. So that takes care of a whole lot off of our river bottom as well. But, I think we're at that point where we need to have that discussion and move that, and maybe we can include that in part of the reporting process of how it goes forward as well.
I know I'm really enjoying the Crime Watch thing. I think that's very good in terms of
And
increasing
please
your
promote it.
transparency. I do. It's a good thing.
David?
And just piggyback off what Aaron said. So, with I guess a restructuring of how police would enforce these codes, is there some kind of I guess police outreach with the community to let them know that this is what you're all doing with the community, so nobody would get startled when the enforcement.
You haven't noticed, like, we'll put a notice in the wintertime that you're supposed to shovel your walks,
Yeah.
and, social media blows up and says, oh, the city doesn't fine us, blah, blah, blah. And then we put a notice about the weeds in the summertime, and social media they come unglued and sit there and hammer us for putting it in.
Okay.
So we do
It's a
try
thing.
and
It's a
notify
thing.
people that, hey, it's spring's here,
All right.
weeds are gonna grow. Yeah.
Councilman Thurman, for the record, I want to point out you're talking
And you go right ahead, sir. You go
Sorry,
right ahead.
it was an inside thing.
Yeah, oh, okay.
He doesn't things with his hands when he's talking.
Okay.
Chief, thank you for being here. I have no questions regarding to this. I did want to ask, and I think it's probably more directed to Mike. Are we still having, at some point, are we going to have the industrial park discussions for issues that occur out there? I know we have chats after, but it's sort of links to this. But thank you for being here.
Sure.
I have no further questions.
I really am in favor of changing that ordinance about instead of sending the citation to the owners, because if they're not locally here, it may get lost in the mail. I think we ought to change that ordinance, that it goes to the inhabitant, whoever's living there. Unless there's a law that we can't do that, but I think that they have responsibility. If they're gonna live there, that they should be able to clean up their mess, their weeds. So I think that we should consider really changing that ordinance. The other thing I was looking at is, it gives 15 days, I believe. What was that for?
As far as the due process, we have, over the years, historically, it was a lot longer, as Chief stated.
Yeah.
I think we've pared down those ordinances. I don't know, I don't want to speak for Les, but we need to look at it. Their legal, due process given for everybody. And I think that 15 days sticks in my mind that was required, but.
I think we need to check into that,
Yeah.
because after 10 days, people just, I think that people are just, they're like that.
There was one year, and I don't remember how it worked out, listen, even if you were the attorney, but we just totally didn't do any of that. We just went and issued a citation. But then I think what happened with that was the court. Because if I issue a citation, you got 30 days before I can put you into court. So this is actually quicker because it's 15 days.
I just think we need to tighten it up a little bit more. I'm not opposed to tightening it up until at least 10 days, to be honest with you. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, we're talking about that one property down on, where the fire burn is around the corner.
Yes.
Like I said, I went by there the other day and there's wood, there's all this stuff. Whenever we find something like that and we cite them that they gotta remove it, they don't remove it. If there's any metal there, can we, and I'm not sure if they would even do it, but could we get somebody like Maniscalco to go in there and salvage all the metal?
So we hire private contractors anyway
Right.
to go and clean it up. So either the city could go do some of the trash part of it, and then a person like Maniscalco, we can ask them if they want to.
Yeah.
clean it up.
Yeah, they'd be more efficient as far as what you said.
And you know, that one's really tricky because they have in the thing a reasonable time, you know, reasonable time, and then we have to try to determine what a reasonable time is based on what we're seeing.
Right.
It's all interpretation by the time you get to
Well,
court.
once that reasonable time runs its course.
Yeah, and that's where we are. That's where we're at with him, and we just need to get it done.
And actually, what you see there, there's been a tremendous cleanup from what was there previously.
You were saying that you're having troubles getting people to, from locally, you have 3 people and you're not even sure if the third one's gonna be able to go in and do any remediation for weeds and stuff. We advertise just locally for that type of
We advertise there, and then I advertise on Crime Watch, and we don't put that one in. There's a place where I can put certified postings, but it's not certified posting.
what if we advertise just, see if we can get some additional action in Raton and Walsenburg?
Yeah, I had 3 applicants. One just called me today, said he didn't want to go through the process any longer. The other one we found, we're using another company to do our backgrounds now, which I think is really helpful and good. They found something in his background that he couldn't go forward, and now I'm just down to one person who, if I hire him, I can't use him to help clean the yards.
I really am in favor also of, and you've had that discussion about separating the code enforcement from the PD. One reason is we know that policemen right now, it's almost like they just walk around with a target on their back. So you do something wrong and then it's like, okay, they're against you. So I think if we separate it, I think it becomes a little bit different because then it's off of your back and onto somebody else's in a code enforcement category. So I think that really, I think is a good thing to do.
I agree.
The other item I wanted to bring up, and we need to figure this out. We have this ordinance in there about storage containers. We gotta do something with that. We have an ordinance in there. They're popping up all over the place. People are not following what they're supposed to be doing. They're putting in these 10 by 40 trailers all over the place. I know that how to remove them. They're supposed to, if they can't produce data set prior to the ordinance, then I think they get cited. And say, you've got to come up to the standards of what the building code says, and you have to do it. Otherwise, it's going to get removed by you or by somebody else. I get hammered on these all the time. I ride around town. They're all over the place. And I'm not sure if you guys get calls on them, but I do.
Yeah, I do.
What storage containers?
These metal containers that they get from China.
Okay,
shipping
okay.
containers. Yeah.
20 foot, 10 foot, 20 foot.
And so the way our code reads is that whenever they do that, they're supposed to apply for a permit, but they're also supposed to bring it up to make it reasonable looking like the rest of the house that's there. And but I'm not sure. But we need to do something with those.
Most people don't put those on foundations, do they?
No.
They're just,
Put them on the
they're
ground.
random, yeah.
They're all self-contained.
Right.
But it's. I'm not sure what you guys think is the answer, but let's get some concerns, questions.
Well, I had a question, just out of curiosity, about graffiti, Chief.
Before we
you
go
want
into
to talk about, okay.
let's talk about the storage containers. can get some, I can.
Well, okay, and what parts of the city are you seeing a lot of this?
All over, everywhere. I saw one last night, it looks like the guy, it's up on 8th Street, and it looks like he's turned it into a garage where he's fixing cars. He has one or two of them.
So are you talking about a time frame that they can actually have the storage container on their property, or are you talking about no elimination of?
No, it's not elimination, but they need to follow the code, but we need to bring them up, make sure that they follow the code, that they're supposed to make it reasonable looking.
Presentable.
The way
Right.
the way the code reads.
I would think that should fall more on the building code, you know?
Yeah. I do too. So I'm in agreement with the mayor about those storage things, but you're saying that's not your jurisdiction.
I would think it should fall under
Right.
building.
So when you're talking about separating code enforcement from the police department, I think that's a great idea because you guys are inundated as it is. Would they take dog calls too?
That should be up to discussion, I guess. We can either keep the dogs or we can put the dogs with the rest as well.
What's your initial thinking about?
I would rather have the dogs go there as well.
Dogs are tough though. And I gotta tell you,
Let's stay with the conversation about storage containers, but I want to get a feeling from
Yeah,
everybody. Frank,
Well, I thought we went over this before, don't we have some kind of an ordinance in
Yes,
that?
we do.
So all we need to do is find some way to enforce it, and if it's a building inspector, then he should be taking care of this.
So-
I think that's the simplest way to do it, is we already
The
have it on the
simplest
books.
way is they drop a, I don't know, 10-ton storage container and he sees it, cites them, you gotta do something, they don't do anything, where's our hammer?
Right.
We'll come and grab it. How are we gonna grab it? We've gotta have a truck, a
Well,
crane.
that's what I'm saying.
And so it's like, they just show up and, yeah, I don't know the answer.
How do
Yeah,
they
that's
get
a
them
hard
there?
issue.
so
The companies deliver
Yeah,
them,
they
drop
deliver
them.
them up a truck.
what if we, there again, I go back to, Maniscalco has a crane.
Do you,
So are we grabbing somebody's property?
yes, potentially.
Yeah, that's,
But
Yeah,
after
we
so
have to,
many,
I mean, you know,
after so many citations.
do you have to have permission to bring them inside the city limits? Or is that just
The-
bring them in,
the
drop them and
ordinance-
keep moving? Is there like a requirement to have over a certain
Not
square
to find
foot
them
to
first.
drop on a property that's XYZ square footage? And, I mean, you should be able to say, okay, I'm bringing this inside the city limits.
Yeah.
Is that a free for all or how's that?
my recollection of the ordinance is you can have it, like, if, as the mayor is saying, you have it appear as if it's improved upon, right? I mean,
right.
if you gussy it up and that's very legal, what I'm saying. No, when you make it look presentable, then it's okay, and if not, then it's not.
So would painting it be presentable?
Possibly,
Yeah. So
possibly, yeah.
there's a lot of holes in it.
Right.
Right.
But we would have to cite probably multiple times and then, do whatever we need to set it up for a taking.
What do you mean by multiple times?
Well, you can't just cite once and say, you're in violation of the ordinance, and then if we had a truck and we had a crane, then go and take it. So it would have to be, borderline nuisance in terms of demonstrating that it was repeatedly violating the code. You have to be careful. I mean, it would, potentially buy us a lawsuit if we went in and just took someone's property and we didn't do so justifiably. Right, then we might have to move it back, we might have to, anyway. That's the risk we run. So I don't think you can do it one time and just cite it.
No, I agree with you, I think that there should be something there.
I think that it's probably unclear to people about the way Trinidad treats. I have not observed that many of them, but it must be unclear to people about whether or not they're permitted to have them, whether or not they could possibly be an ADU. There's a lot of different things that people are probably thinking about when they put one of those in their yard And I think we should be as clear as possible and have rules that are as clear as possible, enforce them as clearly as possible, and follow through, whatever it takes. Because I don't really think people understand. If you see somebody has one, you're like, oh, okay, it's sort of the broken windows theory. You know, if somebody else is doing it, it must be okay. It's only if you have some kind of a clear enforcement mechanism that people understand and know will happen if they do something like that, that motivates people
Well,
to change.
when we brought this ordinance up, we did have people in here talking about it. For and against.
Right, but have we done anything about them?
That's
Has there
it,
been any enforcement
That's the,
activity?
not, that's
Probably
been
not.
the problem.
So who's in charge of that, P and Z? Does it come in front of planning and zoning, or who would it come
No.
in front of?
It would be a building code violation. I think the chief is absolutely right. And there's a bridge ordinance where building code violations can also come into municipal court.
Okay, so it's a civil thing that would come in municipal court, so you'd be a lot more busy.
Yes, yes. It's okay. I mean, that's okay, but that's right. If we were to cite people, then it would go to muni court. That's
And
correct.
that may be what we have to do, and do enough of them that people understand this is what will happen. But I don't think it's something that we should lay at the foot of the police department.
Right.
I think we should consider, like you said, building code, right? Have permission to bring those things into the city limits with a site plan. Say, okay, I have a trailer I want to drop on my property, and these are my plans, like anything else, you know, before you just, because then if you have to go get it, where are you going to take it? Who's going to come get it? Like you said, if you're going to bring it back, you just, let's nip that in the bud before they decide they want to drop one of these on their properties.
Right.
I mean, I think this is reiteration, but I think we should follow what the ordinance says. It's sort of the same thing, but start following what the ordinance says.
Right.
And then it occurs to me this, I don't know what we would call it, new group that we've sort of hit on about for code enforcement, if that could be wrapped into it, that might be an effective way to affect that.
They're getting a lot of duties.
Yeah, and I think we should make it directly responsible to the city attorney.
Let's get a copy of the ordinance and get it out to all of the city councils so we can read it.
He has a new department over there.
Yeah, that's right.
May I ask?
Oh, good.
Sure.
Oh, good.
So, like in that one situation where there's those 4 storage units on that, or say for instance, a police officer goes by and sees something that's not, he understands it, or he or she understands, is not supposed to be there. Is there a report that's made from the police officer to like your office to say, hey,
Yeah, they'll leave something for us.
do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it kind of sounds like in the sense that there's been a little confusion within the city as to who's responsible for the enforcement of that ordinance. And I think that maybe we need to really define that. Sounds like that's one of the first steps, but get that ordinance just so that we can all get a reading on it and then maybe bring it forward again so we can have a further discussion.
All right.
Anything else on that? Code enforcement.
I think we'll talk about graffiti.
Somebody want to talk about graffiti?
Oh, I wanted to ask, Chief, as long as you've been doing like statistical data for the city, what times of the year where graffiti is more prevalent, or is it just random
It pops up mostly through the winter because I can't get it down.
through the winter?
Yeah,
You would think
that's
it'd be
because in the
summer.
summertime, we get it down
Sure.
quickly because I
Yeah.
can go out and paint. By the way, Wednesday morning, if you guys want to volunteer to come paint graffiti, we're gonna meet at 9 o'clock to do that.
Down here.
You know, the one thing we need to talk about just briefly again, like I said, the ordinance changed, like right now, the citation has to go to the owner. Let's get some ideas from council and see, should we cite the owner, continue to do that and just wait to see if it gets back down to the person living there, or should we cite the person that's living there?
I think we should cite the owner.
Karen?
I think we should cite the resident.
We're going back to weeds?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, we
sorry.
can.
Okay, just interrupt.
We're in the weeds.
I was still celebrating on graffiti, man.
Yeah, I can, I'll keep it in the house.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Both and, why not both?
Yeah,
You know,
right,
just make,
That's right.
the owner's ultimately gonna be responsible, but they typically will have a lease with that person that says that the person is responsible
Right,
for
exactly.
removal, so they both need to be on notice,
Yes.
best we can.
Both. I think it's the same, I mean, if the owner has a proper agreement in place with the tenant, they're responsible anyway, so.
Keep that change.
Sure.
Bring it forward. Okay. Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah,
Thank you.
on an up note, you'll see 4 new officers in cars. They started last week.
Nice.
So I got one more position that we're trying to fill, but those 4 have now they've gone through their FTO programs. They're on the streets. I've got one more that needs to finish hers, and then we just have the one opening. So we're good. We're good.
Okay.
So that makes a total of how many?
25.
I think that I'm thinking it would be a good idea for the chief and the city manager, I know all the time you have one, to talk those things through about what functions you think you can foresee would be better handled by an ordinance that allows the city to be the direct enforcement mechanism rather than the police department. Because you see the waste of time that it does with your officers, you see where it doesn't really require a peace officer to
Right.
handle it.
We could swear anybody in municipal court to issue a citation.
So I just would like them to talk.
Okay.
That's
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Great job.
Okay, the last item is discussion on council meeting decorum. And as we know, the last couple of regular meetings, we've just been hammered over by decorum. People giving, insulting council, staff, city manager, our attorney. And I'll tell you what I did is, just to let you know, and I'd recommend, there is it's not a webinar, but it's a virtual meeting coming up. And I think everybody has received that, that there's a guy by the name of Bob Wilder that's going to be giving this, and he's going to be giving it on productive council meetings. And I recommend that we all listen in on that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but let's look and let's find out, but I think it'd be worthwhile. But anyway, after this last week, last 2 weeks, caused me a lot of concern. We have people coming up to the podium and just railing against us. They're not being respectful of council. They're screaming from the back in their seats. And I bought this book a couple of years ago. It's called Mastering Council Meetings. And these are not new tabs. These are tabs that I have from what I have followed in the past. And give you some, we follow a lot of them. But one of the things I talked to this Bob Wilder about, and one of the things that he recommended, 2 things actually, is that we set up some rules that we post when they sign up at the door, put them in big letters. And then there's also, whenever we start the open forum for the community, that whether it's 2 or 3 liners or whatever it is, before we start that open commitment, that I'm to read what their decorum they're supposed to follow. Because it lets them know that we are asking them to be respectful of council. And we try to respect them as well. And I just feel like we need to be very respectful of our constituents. The other thing that is recommended in this thing is that stuff like that, whenever another council person or staff or attorney, or it doesn't make a difference who it is, especially us on the dais, that those comments are not basically directed toward me, but I should be the one fielding them. In other words, you should not. In other words, let's say Charlie is out there and he's said stuff to you, rather than pointing to him, you would say, Mayor, I'm seeing that this was said, you need to direct that comment to me. Because what it does is it takes that person out of that fight, basically, and redirects that question. That's what they're actually recommending. Let me see if I can find some.
I'm gonna try and show.
I don't either. I don't either.
Well, what's happening, let me see if I can find it. Okay, it says orderly public comment. During public comment, require all speakers to address their remarks to the presider. This is not a discussion period. The presider should thank each speaker, whether positive or negative. Authorize the presider to provide brief factual information, if judged appropriate, in response to public comments, or to ask the staff to provide such information. The presider must not, under any circumstances, enter back and forth exchanges with the public. Council members refrain from speaking during this portion of the meeting. When feasible, have staff ready to note input or questions from the public and to provide responses at a later date. Behavioral expectations, I'll read some of this stuff. Model courtesy and respect and require members of the public to do the same. Use titles or honorifics, Sir, Ma'am, Miss Smith, Miss Jones. Personal attacks, insults, profanity are not allowed. Booing, hissing, cheering, clapping, not allowed. Sidebars by council should not be allowed. During public comment, the presider should correct members of the public who fail to observe the guidelines. If the presider does not do this, a council member should raise a point of order. It is important for presider and members to speak in a firm matter-of-fact manner, but not to sound overly harsh or critical. If members of the public become abusive, disruptive, or violent, the presider has the authority to order them from the room. Other suggestions. Provide clearly marked paper inviting individuals who have not heard during the public comment period due to time constraints to provide written comment for council. Do not invite or allow public comments or questions during council discussion of its own agenda items. Be consistent in enforcing all the rules that are established. Recognize that a governmental body must craft its requirements with care in order not to unduly limit free speech by citizens and obtain legal review of your guidelines. The big thing here is, of course, is that if we can ask someone not to be disrespectful or abusive, but if they continue, pretty much we have to allow it because it's freedom of speech. But we need to let them know up front that we are asking them to please be respectful in their comments.
Could I just say a few things? And I don't mean to jump ahead of all of council. I really don't. And I get it, but there are just a few things I'd like to say. And then you can agree with me or disagree with me. And I just want to say a few things to help with the conversation, please. First of all, we've always had decorum. We've always had rules of decorum. But your decorum is only as good as your enforcement mechanism, with all due respect. And so you have to enforce decorum. And if people are yelling, I think we can all agree that if people are yelling things from the back of the room, that's just not appropriate. That's disorderly. It violates a lot of different rules, right? Like you're supposed to be recognized by the chair before you do speak. A number of different things it violates. So yelling from the audience is just not okay. I'd like to say that speaking from the podium, during comments and communications, that is what is completely protected speech. And I think they want to address all of you, right? I mean, not just the mayor, they want to address all of you. But that is when they are allowed to say whatever they want to within most reason, but they're allowed to do everything. I think it is correct that applause from the audience when people speak is not appropriate. And I think that's one kind of gray area that we're in. I think a number of council people have said previously that they thought it was appropriate. And I don't mean to, be at odds with any council people, but what is important here is their message to you, not how the audience takes their message to you. And it's not, and I don't mean to sound, disparaging or anything, but It's not a gladiator sport. It's not a football game. And people giving you their opinion of what is said from here is completely irrelevant, disruptive, and contributes nothing, right? Because also, if you have people coming up here and what they say is unpopular, and they get booed or jeered, what you cheer, you may otherwise jeer. And if that's happening, that's when you kind of have a chilling effect on people's willingness and desire to openly communicate. And one of the things as I was thinking about this, what's not reflected in the minutes? I mean, everything we talk about is reflected in the minutes of a regular meeting. Everything is, but what's not is audience reaction to the comments of people who are speaking. It's an immeasurable, right? And it's like, okay, so how are you supposed to take that? Like, there are 40 people here, and it looks like 25 are in favor of a proposition, 15 are not clapping, 3 were going. I mean, it is not for the audience to do. And I do want to say, this is, I think, kind of like one of my last points. Robert's Rules of Order and the other rules of order are silent on this subject because they deal with parliamentary procedure. They deal with motions and all that stuff. So it's silent on the subject. Section 2-15 of the Trinidad Code of Ordinances talks a little bit about decorum and protocol and how the mayor is the head of all decorum and enforces decorum. But other than that, there are a number of communities that have codified what they say for their rules of decorum. There's even a case out of California that deals with this. But the level of respect, I think if you allow yelling from the audience or applause from the audience, that kind of begins uncivil discourse. And no one else allows it, right? If you look at a county commissioners meeting, it's not allowed. And historically, city council.
But I guess how do you stop that if they just abruptly do that like it happened to us?
Well, understand, you tell them. You have to say something. And you can even start gaveling the audience down. And it's easy for me to say because I've never sat in your chair, Mayor.
No, but you're exactly right. I can't gavel them down, and it's like I disrupted that young lady last week, and I told her, you've had your time to speak.
Right.
I know she was not being addressed, so I had that right to tell her to.
But that was a comment from the audience, and it also is probably, wise to not take people on individually during a council meeting. I'm getting kind of far afield, because that became kind of a personal issue. And that's an issue, I think, for another day, right? Like, she gets up here, and Mayor, I know that when you and I spoke earlier, like you had said something about another presenter, another person speaking, that her comments were inappropriate. That is what is really hard to govern. That is what's really hard.
You can't govern it, but you can ask them to refrain.
You can.
Yeah, I mean, that's the purpose. Right. When I had the discussion with this gentleman,
right?
I asked him that directly, and he said, you can, gavel them or interrupt them and just say, would you please redirect your comment in a little more respectful manner. But whether they continue on that same path, that's up to them. We cannot say you can't do it.
But we
can ask them.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just think that people want to be able to complain, let's say about me, right? They want to complain about me. And I think as an example, and I'm not saying all the time, I think they ought to be able to complain about me. And, I just think that is really the content of what they say. We don't know in advance. And let me give you a quick example. Years ago, Steve Bolton got up here, Tom will remember this, and screamed at council for 5 minutes. I mean, at the top of his lungs. I don't remember if Councilman Shue was on here then. Okay, screamed. And that was painful. That was uncomfortable. It was really inappropriate. But he screamed. And I don't know that he should have been gavelled down. I don't know that he could have been gavelled down. But what they okay, so I want you guys to talk. I'm sorry, I'm shutting up now.
In response to that, we had that discussion too. And let's say, for instance, this gentleman you're talking about, whether he was at the podium or in the audience, and they're disruptive, and you ask them to settle down, but they just continue. So you basically, at some point, he asked me, he says, do you have a sergeant at arms or a police department there? He says, after a period of time, you do have the right to remove them if they become completely disruptive of the proceedings. Now, the other thing that was of interest, and this came out in one of the letters of the editor, is that he was saying here, I don't understand why we are allowed to clap after a civic proclamation, but when individuals clap after a criticism of the public comment section, we are told that it's inappropriate. You know what's really sad about that is when somebody, let's say somebody has saved somebody's life. We have a fire chief that saves somebody's life, and we're not allowed, if we're going to get blasted because we clap for him. So at that point, basically, we can say thank you, and you go on your way. That's the really sad part of this.
Just like the lady that served 40 years help at the Welcome Center.
Yes.
She served 40 years.
So with this,
That deserves a
matter
clap.
of fact, with the gentleman that wrote this, I had that conversation. He says, well, if you do one, you should do both.
It's not the
So I
same.
mean, it's not the same,
It's not the
but it's really sad.
There's a
But
fine
are
line.
we going to have to resort to that?
Yeah, but Mayor, I mean, there are times when clearly audience participation is expected. Proclamations, people coming up, you guys are leading the applause. You're swearing in ceremonies, right? When you guys get sworn in. I mean, you are inviting, and it is clear to everybody that you're inviting audience participation. I was going to say, big difference, gal yelling from the audience versus people making comments from here. Important distinction. That you cannot do, that ever, at any point in time. It's not appropriate to do. It's disruptive of your business. But this is, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right, Mike. So that disruption that I had, what I did, I had every right to do, that disruption from the audience. But I just bring this information to you guys to understand and to see what I'm seeing, and probably maybe you have seen it as well. So anyway, let's get some comments.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I agree with you. I even put this down on paper. I think that we need a posted moral code of conduct when they sign in at the chamber entrance, prohibiting the public jeering and the criticizing elected leaders, unnecessary clapping and loud outbursts, pretty much. I think it has to be a precedent. And people should know that right there when they sign in for 5 minutes, that, you know, if you don't act accordingly, then sorry, you can go somewhere else.
What about the part where this, Mr. Bob Wellner recommended that when the public comment comes up, that I read those 2 or 3 liners as a reminder?
Yes.
May I make a quick response? I think we need to be careful. I think you guys may disagree. I think we need to be careful to not say to people in the code of conduct, you said?
Moral code of conduct.
To not criticize elected officials. That's
Well,
the
to
right
the point
thing.
where, to the point where the loud outbursts, like,
But
What you do is you
Yeah,
phrase
you
that
have-
is just be respectful.
yeah, respect.
That's what I'm trying.
But I mean, to say that we shouldn't be subject to criticism.
Well, because we're always criticized.
What's that?
Yeah, you're right, because we're always criticized. But
Yeah.
to the point, there is a fine line, like he said.
I mean, people don't come here and criticize us. They just have to be respectful while they criticize us.
That's all I'm bringing up. Yeah.
That's,
I agree with you, that was really, those last 2 meetings have been the worst that I've participated in over the 4.5 years. But, you know, it wouldn't be a bad idea, like on the sign-in sheet, if you put just a statement saying that you understand that when you come before council, that you are to be respectful and obey the Robert's Rules of Order. If it's there on the sign-up sheet and their signature is on there, if there's something that comes up that says, I have my right, yes you do. You know, absolutely. I think it's great, but I think there's a right way and a wrong way. And I know we have to take the higher moral ground, I would say, because we're the elected official. We're like the teacher versus the student. We're the ones that are supposed to maintain ourselves, but it's very difficult under the conditions that we've been working with over the past 2 weeks. It's been almost, there's been personal attacks. Should never be.
agree with saying, I think that putting a little thing out there to at least ask them to be respectful would be a good thing. I mean, you can't force
It's a
anybody not
reminder.
to say anything or anything, but if you would just ask them, I think sometimes it works better by just putting it down politely, that if you would be a little more respectful during your 5 minutes, we would be appreciated. You wouldn't have to put anything on there to say you can't do this, you can't do that. It just has to be respectful.
I think decorum is very important in meetings. I agree with that. I think it would be an effective way to do that, to just put a very brief statement, remind them you have 5 minutes and your remarks need to be respectful. But I have a strong aversion to anything that's going to quell people's
No, that's not good.
if I can finish, quell their the feeling that they need to communicate to us. We're a representative body, and they obviously are agitated about something that we've done, some lack of leadership that they see, that they want to see leadership from us. So I want to hear that. I want to do the best job that we can do. So I don't want people coming in here and thinking they have to say nice things to us all the time, because,
No, that's not.
well, I think that could be a message that gets out if we at all tell them, you're not going to be able to respond, you're not going to be, they're human beings, and they're obviously frustrated deeply about something that is going on in the city, something that we're not seeing. I think that's a healthy sign that our community has so many people coming. They're interested in what we're doing, and they want us to do the right thing, and they feel like they want to make sure we've heard them. So I don't want at all I'm sorry, I can't think of the word, to discourage them from doing that.
So do you think being called stupid is?
I think she was well within her rights.
Oh, to say, yeah, I agree.
And, it's funny, I was reading the follow-up of that, and she stuck with her guns, and I'm like, okay, as an elected person, you have to have a thick skin. Maybe something we've done is stupid. We need to be able to understand that that's the way it's come across to people in our community.
I believe she was venting because she did a 180. She actually started out by saying she was sick of taking care of people and people dying, and then she did like this 180.
But she
to us.
was
So I don't think she was
obviously
intimidated.
frustrated about, no, I don't think she was intimidated at all, but I
Yeah.
think she was obviously frustrated about a decision that we had made, wanted us to understand that she thought that decision was stupid. It's that, and so it'd be nice if she said it a different way, but she doesn't have any obligation to do that. I hear her.
You definitely have to have a thick skin, for sure, right? So I agree with a mix of everybody's feelings about it. You definitely should set the tone prior to meetings, and some people also suggest you hold your applause and you're jeering to the end, and also be respectful of council, because it can easily get sidetracked. Like if they attack less, and then we're all going down that rabbit hole for 30, 40 minutes, and then have to swing back into whatever we were, you definitely should just start off with, hey, everybody, this is, put your tomatoes and cabbages up, please don't hit the crowd, and, you know what I mean, just set the tone, raise the bar high, and then if it starts to, but if you start here, we can't never get it back up here, so definitely let everybody know, put the sign out and say, hey, because everybody might not know the charter rules. We know the rules, but maybe they come in here and think, okay, this is my time to point at people and talk crazy. Because when Jay Gonzalez came in that one time and went off, I was just like, oh, is this what we're doing? That's how we started off my city council, and then I realized that was a one-off, I thought, right? And then so definitely raise the bar high, and then if it starts to,
I'm gonna say this again. Join city council, it'll be fun, they said. I agree with something that you just said a lot. Like, I think it's important for people to be able to come and share what's on their mind. I think, though, another thing you said is, you said something to the effect of, like, it's up to us to know the standards that we're supposed to support. So if you look at it through the whole thing, I mean, you know, Mayor, I'll admit you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to control that action, and then we, by the rules you said, strictly the rules you said, we kind of didn't hold up our end of the bargain either by interacting with people from the podium during public comments from my memory. So I mean, I think it's just important that we follow what was laid out there, that people in the public know they can come here and express any idea that they want to, so long as it's done with respect. I would like to point out, and I don't actually, I'll hold there.
You know, I'm gonna say this, and you know, I thought about this afterwards because I've been called that before, about a good old boy. I actually take that as a compliment. And I'll tell you why.
I don't.
I do, I'll tell you why. I was raised by my father to be respectful of people, and he said, son, you're a decent young man, you're good. So I took that as a compliment, actually. And that's what I've said. I look at the mirror every day. I'm doing a decent job. I'm trying to do the best job. I'm not God. If people expect us as council to be perfect, you need to remember there's only been one perfect person. Sorry about that. So anyway, so it sounds like there's some consensus of maybe doing something. I'll get with you, Les. We'll put
Sounds
something together. We'll put something together. And I mean, we gotta make sure it's done right.
Right.
And but we'll do it.
Good.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Any other items that council wants to bring up in the future?
Just really quick, Mayor, I got the email that I sent out to council on effective governance webinar from CML. It's May 16th. So I sent that out, and there's a registration there for council. That's just for your information.
I mean, and if everybody can participate, can we just register everybody? And then if we can all get the link and tell you?
We can all, I have a gift certificate. I want to draw you.
Oh, you good? Cool.
Yeah.
You would. But I think it'd be good to, and you can bring up these questions to this gentleman. He's actually an attorney for, and not one of the attorneys from up north, and that's his specialty evidently, is council meetings.
And medical situation, my sister's having a heart surgery next week, so I don't know if I can do that.
Well, we can find out and see if maybe it's recorded or something.
Yeah, maybe since it's a
I think I
webinar.
can watch it later.
Yeah. Okay. Any other items that maybe people want to bring up?
No, I just wanted to ask Mike if there's any updates on the Radfest.
Nothing new, but we've had several meetings, planning meetings with them. We even met with the mayor of Leadville to discuss ins and outs that they see, because this Lifetime Fitness started in the race in Leadville. So it's ongoing. I'm not sure if they put in for their special event with Marty Happy yet, but yeah, it's going to happen, and we're coordinating with them.
And Santa Fe Trail Days, June 11th and 12th.
Yes.
You see those events are filling up.
Yeah.
Karen, anything further?
Yes, sir. I would like You know, we're talking about a year ago, we did our list on capital improvement projects. And figured out which project we thought we wanted to go through. I think we need to revisit that list because for instance, Parks and Rec, we wanted an indoor swimming pool. And then when you get into the discussion about what it's really worth, we're sitting there retaining the money for that pool where it might be, we could use it someplace else.
I think that Frank ever made that recommendation.
Yeah. That and also on the marijuana money distribution, I'd like to see, I don't understand the procedure the staff does to get us that list. Do they give us everything that is asked for, or do they pick the top 10?
No, it goes into department head meetings and everybody has their requests and not all are brought forward, but
Okay.
we're gonna bring this forward here shortly. We've got the numbers, they are down. They're matching our 2019 numbers. 2020 and 2021 were an anomaly, but there's the traffic is down noticeably.
Yeah, you can see it.
Can-
But I like to,
I'm selling it on commercial.
Really?
Yeah, big time. Sorry, my feelings. Take it personal.
I'd like to readdress that money. I have somebody that lives in Raton said there's only one dispensary in Raton.
Yeah.
And their prices are
Expensive.
like 40% higher
Wow.
than we are here.
Wow. Good.
And the constituents that buy from Wilson were that.
Yeah.
We
That's
need
all.
someone with a sandwich board in front of that dispensary and say, go to Trinidad. 26 dispensaries north of here for cheaper weed. That's right. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Put up a big sign.
Across state line.
Yeah, right. You go, yeah.
I got a lot. Yes. Lights on Garfield, lights on going up to Santa Fe Trail. It's getting terrible up there. We've got a lot of people walking and people are just not smart. They wear black all the time. And I mean, you can't see these people and especially on Santa Fe Trail, there's no shoulder to walk on in some of those areas and they're walking out in the middle of the street. And we're really seriously fortunate that nobody has really gotten killed up there. And we have the poles and that, and I understand that we have everything for Garfield, so I can't see any reason why the people in Allendale can't have some lights. And that's a big deal there. There's a lot of people that walk there at night, going up and down the hill there. So, well, I tried, but the dogs chase me around. That area.
What do you do to the dog? They don't like you.
They don't like my dog, so the two dogs are fighting all the time.
Eric, what do you got?
I ran into Rusty Goodall the other day, and he told me that he's planning on coming to the next city council meeting to give us a short presentation on what his review of, he's talked with every dispensary in town, and he's gonna give us kind of a fast and dirty, here's what they're saying. He said, I don't wanna answer questions, and I said, well, he said, if you want me to, I can come back for a work session, but I think it would be good to have a work session and talk about what he's observing, if they have any ideas of how we can help them. I think it would be good for us to know those things. We got an email today from someone, I forget the name of the person, who was suggesting, like Santa Fe Trail, make it a more formal path to Fisher's Peak, make that, something that we're selling that idea. I don't know, that's a pretty good idea. I think that's, I think what Frank is saying is really true. If we're saying this is gonna be a pathway from downtown to the peak, we better have really safe bike paths, just everything that we've been planning and some of the things that came out of the traffic study. I'd like to have a work session about the traffic study and all of the things that they were promoting and see if we have can have any input into what ultimately happens with regard to all those plans. And another thing that I'm seeing that people want some leadership from us on is where the Welcome Center is going to be located. And I'd like to know where things stand with that. What is our position about where we'd like to see it? Do we have any preference? I'd like us to have a voice in that.
Oh, sure, we have to have it.
Yeah, but I don't know what's going on, and I'd just like to know what's going on with
Well,
it.
we, just to let you know, we did have a meeting last Friday, was with the CTO, and we'll bring that forward. And the discussion was not pretty much where to put the center, but the discussion that I wanted to find out if there was any money for a welcome center at the state level. And where can we go to apply for money, because that's where it's gonna start, because it's probably gonna be $5-6 million project at least, minimum, maybe even more. So the question is where can we access funds? The next thing is where the possibilities were. And we're very limited, it almost seemed like, to where.
I think there are lots of possibilities that are available, but I think that what I'm hearing is that there's a great deal of concern that it's going to end up out at exit 11, and the problem with that is that it's not going to drive people to Trinidad. And if we've lost the path from downtown, we've lost that driver, and I don't want to, ultimately Starkville's going to benefit, and Starkville's a great place, but Trinidad needs this stability. It needs that boost to feet on the ground.
Well, see, and that's what's bugging me, is that people are already projecting that we as council are promoting exit 11. We haven't even had that discussion yet. But we had the survey that came out, and it's like, were we ever informed the survey was coming out? No. There was a survey that came out.
Yeah, a Google survey.
A Google survey, and then, so why weren't we informed and say, we're gonna try to put the survey out, do you have any suggestions? We should be informed, because we're the ones who finally make that ultimate decision. So we should be, part of the discussion.
Maybe it's part of that frustration that you're seeing out there, is that they're not seeing that leadership from us, and they're saying, we gotta make our voice heard, or something's gonna happen, and we're not gonna have had any say in it. So I think that's a really important, the content of what they're saying, I think, is what we should be attending to.
Here's the other thing that, I know I said this, when I decided to run for mayor at the, way back, I said, there's going to be times that we're going to make decisions that are not popular. And when it doesn't fit with somebody's idea of what they would like, that's where all of this comes about.
Of course, but they want to know that they've had some voice in it. I mean, obviously we make decisions every time that some people have and some not, but if they feel like those decisions they had no input in, they get questioned.
I feel that we've allowed everybody, anything that has been done, I think that they have had opportunities to voice opinions. I can talk about that, I think I know what you're talking about, we can talk about that because, but anyway, clarify.
I'm just swinging back to, I guess, marijuana, and I was just reflecting on what the young man from Canaco, I guess he was here a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying it was like about 50% drop off already with foot traffic. I want to figure out how could we retain that going forward, so we don't just be at the mercy of New Mexico opening up more dispensaries, and we just keep losing foot traffic with marijuana. So do we talk about consumption laws or consumption clubs, or how do we keep the foot traffic here for another 2 or 3 days instead of them just getting on the highway and going about their business to the next town? So I have seen a significant drop off working on Commercial Street. 420, I didn't see any Texas license plates this time. That's crazy. And I haven't seen any since. Maybe this past weekend with everything that's going system, and, I was like, okay, we got some action, but I don't foresee it getting any better after the summertime, so we should figure out how to.
You know, we
But
should,
then again, I don't know anything about the boom or bust cycle of Trinidad.
there is no boom and bust,
It's no, it's just booming, or is it
just bust.
just?
No, I'm just kidding. No.
Harold, what's your?
You know, I had mentioned a few times, and I'm only bringing this up because I think it's relevant. And I'm going to try and make this as quick as I can. But I mentioned about using some funds from somewhere to try and help commission a study, something for the marijuana industry to pivot towards national legalization and our impending drop off of funds. I've mentioned that a few times, and I understand, it's difficult in a lot of ways. But it seems like Trinidad to me, and I'm not an expert on the industry at all, kind of, but it seems to me that the product is grown here is good quality, has the potential to be cheaper. I think that's something we should still look at, and then it is you don't have to be a business owner on commercial to see the decline. It's visible just going down there on this Saturday morning. My family and I like to eat breakfast down on commercial on Saturday morning. I mean, it's very, very visible. So this is what I was wondering. Someone mentioned the sandwich board in front of their dispensary. I apologize, sir. I'm trying to keep my eye on this. We really should look, this is my opinion, we should look at some way to try and drive traffic here. I'm sure all of you that have traveled to Texas has seen that sign. I think it's just past text line, and it's a huge billboard. What's that?
Texarkana.
It says got weed, and then you call a lawyer.
Right.
I really think.
Oh, I gotta start doing that. I'm sorry.
But my point is, I think we should put up sandwich boards in the form of billboards. Find out, and we might do some of this, but we need to do it in a bigger way. Where are we advertising Trinidad? Are we telling people out in the flats of Texas, Oklahoma, hey, come to Trinidad, we got a brand new state park, put a picture on there, people from there love the mountains, put a picture on there, advertise Monument Lake, tell them there's this many dispensaries with a lower cost, it's only X number of miles past where you're planning on going anywhere. I mean, if we're seeing this much decrease now, it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. I think we should really try and protect it. I really think I'd like to see a work session on and bring some people in too, like public comment, like what can we do? Let's knock our heads together and.
I'm sorry. We should
Here's what I'm saying is just like everything else.
And the crime in the trailer. I'm sorry. The
Industrial park.
industrial. Okay. Sorry.
Just the marijuana thing, like I said, it's just like I mentioned that night. Anytime it's just like, I mean, there's a new fashion now. Everybody goes toward that new fashion for a period of time. And it also boils down to marketing. It's not only up to us to change that mentality of drawing them here. It's also up to the dispensaries to create their marketing plan as well. How are they going to market, what they're selling? So we have the possibility. I know that right now we have a 5% sales tax. Is that something that we could change down to 4.5% to 4%? Yeah, that's something we could do. But we would also need, I think, them to step the industry here to step up to the plate to how they're going to market their product. So it's got to be a combination of both. It can't be just us.
Yeah.
So I think it's all.
That's what I'm saying. A work session though. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
bringing in people and saying, okay, what are your thoughts? People from the industry that are here. I think that, I mean, that's something that's within our power as, to say we want to change the 5%. If we're down, and I know that when they do the budgeting process, Cheryl is very conservative as to what we can deal with, and we've expected this. And I think it's just a matter of,
If I may make a response to that, you drive anywhere in this country, you drive up I-25 and you see the signs for Seven Falls, Santa's Workshop, and people go to those places. Let's identify the main thoroughfares from the south, the west, and the south, east and east, and start directing people here. I mean, they may start out, hey, we're heading to Taos, see what, a new state park, and oh, there's a great mountain lake resort. Hey, let's go up there.
exactly. That's why I say it's the entire marketing process.
We do have a billboard. I
Let's
don't
have
think
more.
we use it. No, we do have a gigantic billboard down at Folsom. And I don't think anybody's used it or we put anything on it, but it's right on.
Well, then, man, that's low hanging fruit right there.
The tourists used to, tourist board used to put it, but I don't think we've done that for years. It's been quite a while, so I don't know if we still, but we do own it, and it's a great big billboard, it's right on the highway.
So I think it'd be worthwhile to have a work session, to bring in somebody, a couple of people, and however many want to come in from the industry, local industry here, to give us their thoughts as to what they're seeing and what they can do. And asking us what maybe we can do.
We need to ask tourism. whether-
Exactly. I was gonna say, we have a taxing mechanism, we have the whole thing in place for advertising for
Exactly.
Trinidad, yep, for tourism, yeah.
But that's like turbocharged.
Okay,
The one thing I wanted to mention is that when, a couple of weeks back, Mr. Jeffs came forward and was saying that he was working on a plan for the streets. Could you find out how far along it is to completion with that medicine effort? Anything else?
What's the name of that book? And should I get it?
It's called Mastering Council Meetings.
I think I got that when I went through my training.
I think I bought this at Barnes and Noble, I think, I'm not sure. Okay, thank you for
Okay, thank
the
you.
session's ended. Thank you very much.
Right on.
Councilman Chu,
Yeah.
thank you, sir. No punching in the facial area.